development of people. Nyerere said if development were to happen, we have to invest in our people and develop them through educating them. And by developing the people of Tanzania, we are developing Tanzania. That's the quote from this Freedom and Development. Moving on to the point of development for the people, he was really, really eager to the development being applicable to the whole nation, everybody. For Tanzania is the people, and the people means everybody. So it was really stressing that development in Tanzania should not just hit the few, an elite, but development by the people being a key factor. And not heading into the quote in general, but having a citizenry united around a collective understanding of development was the only way of facilitating the development needed in a good way. You know, and this made equity, unity, and collectivism central values and principles for development in Tanzania. Now, this provides quite a positive picture of Maendeleo as a development discourse. I think we should provide some critical perspectives, because when Maendeleo was put into action, it was basically through the project of Ujamaa, which was small villages, communities trying to be self-sustained. And this whole project failed quite drastically, and quite a substantial amount of people died due to the disturbance of food markets, among other things. So while the actual enactment of Maendeleo was in many ways a failure, the discourse of development as it is still has kind of held its status within society. Connecting, seeing how Maendeleo and now neoliberalism kind of met each other, and to come to my point of my paper, in the 80s and 90s, Tanzania was experiencing quite some economic struggles, which forced them to take up external loans from the IMF, the World Banks, and through the structural adjustment programs, the country saw a liberalization, both socially, economically, and politically. And we saw the introduction of capitalism and also multi-party democracy. And kind of being, in a sense, contradictory to the development discourse of Maendeleo, one should think that the development discourse, or the idea of development in the country, should change during this period of time. However, by having incorporated the ideas and principles of Maendeleo into the national identity of Tanzanians, being Tanzanian is also an understanding of how we as a nation, as a people, should develop. Maendeleo proved to resist and prevail, and resisting these more extreme aspects of neoliberalism, especially when it comes to the individualistic thought or thinking of development. They managed to maintain a really people-centered and collective discourse of development in the nation. So moving to my conclusion and basically what the paper is about, I'm arguing that the incorporation of the development discourse of Maendeleo into the national identity through education, it has contributed to a formation of a Tanzanian nation with a population rooted in values and principles from its socialist past, despite the introduction and incorporation of neoliberalism to the country. And also a shared understanding of development among Tanzanians, being part of their national identity, has proven resistant to the influence from neoliberalist ideology. And from a more general perspective, I would argue that formation of identity, and particular national identity, is a powerful tool in bringing about collective and lasting understandings of development. And just to finish up, I want to leave us with quite a powerful quote from President Nyerere. He's saying, "But all of us are Tanzanians. Together we are the people. Our development is our affair, and it's the development of ourselves as people that we must dedicate ourselves to. And finally, I just want to give a quick advertisement. It's going to be a webinar on this paper, as well as a really interesting paper from my colleague Irene, all the way in the back, on February the 14th. It's a Tuesday, 12 a.m. It's going to be online, so if anybody is interested, I would gladly share the information. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your wonderful presentation on development. Speaking about development just makes me think about Walter Rodney's book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And he talks about this connection between the global north and the global south. And I just think you made me think that when considering development, you have to consider our histories of colonialism and apartheid. So when considering education and development, it's important to consider our histories of colonialism and apartheid. But thank you for your wonderful presentation. I'd like to open up the floor for any questions. Yes, question, ma'am?
I can hear Prisca. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for a very good presentation and the elaboration of the trend of the Tanzanian politics. I was wondering about the of self-reliance, which came in 1967. How did you incorporate it in your discourse? Because that was very much related to the political state at that time between socialism, between West and East.
Thank you so much, Prisca.
And another question I can ask. Another question is, you mentioned that the Maendeleo discourse has helped to resist the neoliberal, but in which ways?
Thank you. I should be quite humble here. There's a really good questions, and you have a good background to ask them. First and foremost, on the issue of self-reliance and how it connects to Maendeleo. I think they go hand in hand, basically, and both the Universal Declaration, Education for Self-Reliance, they're basically an operationalization of development as Maendeleo, and Maendeleo, as much as being a people-centered development, it also embeds this understanding of self-reliance. So I think they're more or less overlapping in a sense. To answer the first question, the second one was on how Maendeleo has contributed to the resistance of neoliberalism. I think my argument in my paper is that having these principles of Maendeleo of being collectiveness, people-centeredness, having them rooted so strongly in a national identity that is quite strongly incorporated into the Tanzanian population has made Tanzanians' understandings of development being maintained partially, even though, you know, neoliberalism really has been introduced to the country with all its you know, strong focuses on individualism. And I think Tanzanians have not changed their self-image despite the introduction of neoliberalism. And you know, of course, it's a bold statement, but at least in theory, that's my argument. But I would love to have you read my paper and give me your feedback.
Can we have a round of applause? Thank you. Okay. Our next speaker on breaking the norm, conducting a needs analysis for a literacy intervention strategy, ES20. Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Chweni ES. I'll be presenting on behalf of Moloja TW, Maswanganyi KN, and Ndlovu S. Now, our study was a part of a broader independent study named Education as a Driver of Sustainable Development, Organizing Schools as Enabling Spaces for Improvement in Learning and Health Outcomes. Now, this was a three-part study. And then there was the social and health part, and then the leadership part, and then our part was on the learning outcomes. Now, our title goes as follows. It says, Breaking the Norm, Conducting a Needs Analysis for a Literacy Intervention Strategy in the Capricorn District. For our introduction, we are having a challenge in South Africa. Now, the challenge is that we have low performance of foundation phase learners in literacy. Now, this problem was spotted by the PELS, or the Progress in International Reading Literature Study, and the SACMEC, which is the Southern and Eastern African Consortium for Monitoring Educational Quality. Now, they have spotted that in South Africa, our learners are not reading as they are supposed to be reading, or their if proficiency is not as or where it is supposed to be, or the threshold that has been put internationally, we have not yet reached it. So there have been several solutions tried by the Department of Education, and they include policy amendments to make sure that in their policy they include different ways in which teachers would be able to teach learners in a way that their proficiency would improve. But our policy intention versus the outcomes are very different. This keeps on interrupting me. Maybe if it was my laptop, it would have been different, but it's okay. So now, the outcomes are not as intended by the policy. So we have also noticed that there is a lack of parental involvement. This is supposed to be done because the white paper 6 actually it's a law that parents should be involved in their learners or their children's education. And then also the low socioeconomic status also plays a factor, and the low literacy levels of parents, and the COVID-19 pandemic also played a role in the low performance of our foundation phase learners. So finally, I'm moving as it's forcing me to move. For my problem statement, we also see the continuing decline of literacy skills in the foundation phase. Now this once we saw it in the rural foundation phase learners. Now they are unable to read and write properly. Okay, it's gonna do this the whole entire time. You'll just have to forgive me for this. There are national and international programs initiated to counter the low performance, and they include the early grade reading program, the Save the Children program, the Eco Schools program, early childhood development program, and the integrated health program, amongst many others. However, the problem of low performance of foundation phase learners in our country still exists, or it still persists. Now, we intended to analyze the needs of rural primary learners to see what could be the cause of this low performance when it comes to our classrooms. Now, we used the systematic intervention theory as our theoretical framework. Now, when the foundation phase learners in rural areas struggle to reach satisfactory reading and writing capabilities, and teachers have implemented any form of classroom intervention for the learner in question, now then the external intervention structure must be invited. Now, if this is not invited, we'll still stay at the same level of performance. Now, this theory suggests that if a learner is struggling to succeed in school, there must be something else that could be done out of school. That is why we did the needs analysis. Now, the needs analysis highlights the discrepancy between reality and expectation, and the discrepancy model matches the reality versus expectations. So the reality is that our learners cannot read and write properly, but they are expected to read and write properly. So this model was used to review the policy expectations as set out in South African Department of Education, and it also framed and informed the shape of the study's phenomenon. Now, for our methodology, we used the qualitative research method, and then we used also the rapid evidence assessment to get to the gist of the matter. And then we went to the Limpopo province to different circuits, Molepo circuit, Matiba, Mogodumo, Westernburg, and Motapo circuits. And then we also used convenient sampling to just check the schools whereby learners were having a low literacy performance, so that we may be able to see what needs might they be having. And then also we have conducted one-on-one interviews with each of the parents, the teachers, the SGBs, and the leadership of the school. And then we had the convenient sampling, yes, and then we had one-on-one interviews. Then lastly, we had thematic data analysis to assist with analyzing our data that we got. Because a lot of stuff that was said, it was just narrative. People were just telling us stories of how they've encountered their teaching and what they would love to see thereafter. And then for the findings and discussions, educators highlighted that they were having loads of challenges when it comes to teaching their learners. Now, what is currently happening is that there were no foundation phase trainings for teachers. So all primary education teachers were trained to teach in the primary school, but none of those educators were taught to teach in the foundation phase. Now recently, the different universities or departments in the university have created programs that would cater for that. However, the number of foundation phase educators is still low. Hence, in different schools and many schools, we still have educators teaching the foundation phase, but they are not taught to teach the foundation phase learners, or they're not well equipped to teach foundation phase learners. Now, when the school management team sits down and they need a teacher to teach foundation phase learners, they'll just call all educators and then just ask any of the educators that are willing to teach in the foundation phase, and then just take them there. So they did not get proper training